All right, down to the business of today. I am excited to welcome our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, as well as our Lieutenant Governor, Garland Gilchrist. We also have our director, Chris Harkins, that is joining us. So I just am excited. So thank you for the opportunity to come before all of us. Here we go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, it is so good to be with both of you and all of the women and men on the appropriations committees in the House and Senate. Today, I'm really excited to share my executive budget recommendation to lower costs, to grow our economy, and to build a brighter future for Michigan. Before I jump into my prepared remarks, I would like to just acknowledge that an incredible amount of work goes into this budget presentation. It started when many of you were still knocking doors last fall. It is a 5-month process, and Director Harkins and his whole team at the State Budget Office who are have worked so incredibly hard to get us here. So we've done a lot of work to come. Your work begins today, and I know many of you are new to appropriations or to the legislature, and just wanted to make sure that sharing a little bit of perspective, because now the ball is in your court, and I know that you will be doing a tremendous amount of work on the state budget as well. But to talk about the recommendation that I'm putting in front of you, as I said, my State of the State, our #1 concern for Michiganders across our state right now is costs. That's why I propose lowering my costs. It's a plan to roll back the retirement tax, saving 500,000 households $1,000 a year, quintuple the working families tax credit to deliver nearly $3,200 in refunds to 700,000 families. That's an extra $550 back in people's pockets, totaling $384 million statewide, and it directly benefits almost half the children in Michigan, 1 million children. We deliver pre-K for all by the end of this term, saving families $10,000 a year and offering 110,000 4-year-olds a great start. We know how critical this is for getting parents, especially moms, back to work, and that's part of the proposal as well that we have put together and that you are right now debating, and sending every tax filer an inflation relief check, offering immediate relief. My budget goes further on this same theme, to lower costs, with 2 more tax cuts to save people money. First, a refundable tax credit up to $3,000 for childcare and for preschool teachers. The professionals who work with our youngest Michiganders have hard, very difficult, almost thankless jobs. Let's have their backs and let's save them some money. Second, a sales tax cut on electric vehicles to save drivers money and get more Michigan-made cars and trucks on the road. Specifically, the proposed cuts are to the state sales tax on the first $40,000 of an electric vehicle, saving up to $2,400 in taxes. Now, we as a state have to make sure that we are meeting our children's needs, and focusing on education is a continuing effort that you will see reflected in this budget. This budget works on all of those fronts and much more. 2 weeks ago, I proposed the My Kids Back on Track. This would offer every student more opportunities to catch up with tutoring, after-school support, and other personalized learning support. We can get this done, and I'm hoping we can get it done by spring break. My budget includes a heck of a lot more to help every student in Michigan thrive. The highest per student funding ever. Now, since I've taken office, we've raised it by 22%. This improves in-class experiences and delivers additional support for special education, at-risk students, English language learners, and rural and isolated districts. Free breakfast and lunch for every child in Michigan, every student, period. We know a child whose tummy is growling has a very difficult time, if at all possible, to appreciate and to participate in the academics and all the education that is happening in school. It's nearly impossible for hungry kids to learn. We're going to make sure that 1.4 million students are fed at school. This will help families and help them save about $850 a year. We will become the 4th state in the nation to get this done if Michigan gets it done. And I'm hopeful that we can work together to achieve this important aspect. Continued funding for students' mental health and school safety is reflected in this budget as well. We know that anxiety and depression has been named as a top concern that parents have across the country, but what we're focused on is Michigan parents who've told us the same thing. Supporting our kids is a priority for every one of us in this room. I'm confident when I say that. Literacy support from cradle to career, so everyone can learn how to read and succeed in their next grade or their next job. And we're proposing a free field trip for every 4th grader, all 100,000 of them, to visit a state park and witness pure Michigan firsthand. Let's show them what makes Michigan so special and incorporate classroom lessons in the process. $300 million in healthy school grants. This is an effort to improve water and air quality in our schools and lower energy costs. And funding to help districts buy 500 electric school buses. This reduces energy costs for schools, lowers asthma rates, hearing loss, and road noise. We know that our kids' success depends on the caring, qualified educators who are standing in the front of their classrooms. The budget builds on work that we did last year to grow the teaching profession. This budget continues the My Future Educator Fellowship, which is already putting over 2,200 Michiganders on tuition-free paths that lead them to the front of our classrooms. Continues student-teacher stipends, ensuring that they get compensated for their hard work and stay on the path to full-time career in teaching. Funds teacher-to-teacher mentorship programs, rural teacher workforce development, and a statewide Talent Together initiative to recruit and train more educators. That is K-12, and those are some of the highlights. I'm going to move on now to higher education. When I say higher education, I do not just mean a bachelor's degree. We're talking about our phenomenal community colleges all across the state and trade schools as well. This budget will increase paths to these opportunities to help us achieve our state goal of 60 by 30. That is to have 60% of our adults have earned a higher education or certificate by 2030. We are making strides, but we've got more good work to do here. So let's keep moving toward that goal by temporarily lowering the age of the Michigan Reconnect from 25 to 21. Reconnect was a bipartisan program offering anyone 25 and older a tuition-free associate's degree or skills training opportunity. We created this together in the last term in a bipartisan effort with a lot of different groups coming together, recognizing that meeting the needs and sharpening our skills is crucial for individual prosperity as well as prosperity of our state and the health of our economy. Over 114,000 people are already on that path, and when we lower the age, it opens Reconnect to 350,000 more potentially eligible people. Second, let's continue funding the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, which will lower the cost of college by thousands for most students starting this year with the graduating class of this year. Scholarships are up to $8,250 over 3 years for community college, $20,000 over 5 years for private university, or $27,500 over 5 years for our public universities. This covers 4 out of every 5 college students in Michigan, and according to the Michigan College Access Network, helps 65%, nearly 2/3 of graduating students get a tuition-free higher education. And third, let's make sure that students who start their degree complete it. That means supporting students with additional on-campus mental health services, grants to help with child care, and help with transportation. I think we can also work with colleges to improve graduation rates, and as I was in Flint yesterday, I know that Mott does a great job with child care. Perhaps that's an area where we can pursue as well. Let's move on to health. First, I want to talk about insulin. In America, insulin can cost 10 times as much as other nations. and prices have tripled over the last decade. So let's attract a manufacturer and make our own insulin so that we can save folks who need it hundreds of dollars a month. We need to make sure that Michiganders who want to start a family have the support to do so, and that means additional maternal health efforts. In Michigan, 63% of maternal deaths are preventable, and Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. That's not right, and that's not acceptable. So let's keep expanding Healthy Moms, Healthy Babies, a bipartisan program that currently offers doula services, at-home visitation, support groups for new moms, and other initiatives to close racial disparities in health. We need to make sure that Michiganders can start families when they're ready to do so. So let's fund Plan First and expand access to family planning services, STI and cancer screenings, basic lab services to 25,000 people, and saving them an average of $2,000 a year. In addition to health policies that directly benefit people, we need to invest in community health as well. My budget proposes additional funding for local frontline health departments, a raise for our direct care workers that serve in our nursing homes and provide home-based supports, funding to deliver on recommendations from the Racial Disparities Task Force to close racial health disparities, set up mobile health clinics in underserved areas, and much more. And bolstering recruitment efforts in behavioral health workers, helping more people access mental health care. Now let's talk about public safety. As a former prosecutor, this is a core issue for me. Since I took office, Michigan has invested $1 billion more into public safety. This budget proposal invests nearly $500 million more, building on the recent supplemental investing in law enforcement training. It includes dedicated resources for the first time ever to hire, train, and retain local cops, firefighters, EMTs, and upgrade our public safety facilities and equipment. The budget also funds evidence-based solutions to tackle the root causes of violence, God bless you, including community violence intervention programming, and builds on our bipartisan criminal justice reform by furthering juvenile justice initiatives to ensure young people have strong legal protections and support. And as I said in my State of the State, let's deliver on common sense gun safety legislation supported by a majority of Michiganders, universal background checks, safe storage, and extreme risk protection orders. Now, of course, we got to talk about infrastructure. I know none of you would recognize me if I didn't even talk a little bit about roads. Since I took office, we have fixed 16,000 lane miles of road, 1,200 bridges all across our state, and supported 89,000 jobs in the process. We're fixing them the right way with the right mix and materials, with experienced workers making a prevailing wage and without raising taxes by a dime. This budget will invest $200 million to fix bridges and to fund $160 million in grants to improve rail, maritime, and local transit. I've already mentioned additional funding to build up our schools. The budget includes several other infrastructure investments to build and refurbish hundreds of affordable housing units all across Michigan, to replace 40,000 lead service lines, to install hundreds of electric vehicle chargers, to help families and small businesses switch to clean energy, to improve state parks, and to grow our $10 billion outdoor recreation industry, to incentivize factories to lower emissions, streamline the permitting process, and to move dirt faster. There's a lot of exciting aspects to this budget and a huge opportunity in front of us all. The good news is that we've got momentum and we've built a foundation from which to take Michigan to the next level. 3 weeks ago, we learned we had a multi-billion-dollar surplus, up from a projected $3 billion deficit in 2020. I think that's worth repeating, $3 billion projected deficit just a few years ago. 2 weeks ago, we saw General Motors announce another $800 million investment in Flint and Bay City, and the Michigan legislature passed bills offering $1 billion in tax relief by rolling back the retirement tax and boosting the working families tax credit. Just last week, I signed a supplemental to build thousands more affordable housing units, revitalize our communities, and empower entrepreneurs. And best of all, we know as the days get longer, we get a couple minutes more every single day to do the work that we promised the people we serve that we would get done. 2023, I think, is going to shape up to be a really great year. Let's keep getting the work done. Now I want to turn it over to Budget Director Harkins for a few more details. Am I doing questions first? Okay, actually now, Madam's Chairwomen, I would like to entertain a few questions personally, and then I'll hand it over to our Budget Director. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. We appreciate that. I'll take the first question, which is around talent. You mentioned some of this in the State of the State a few weeks ago, and you previewed a few pieces, but at the top of my mind and a lot of our minds is around how to both retain talent in our state and attract new folks. So Reconnect helps with that. You know, that's near and dear to my heart, but what are some other ways that we're dealing with our talent crisis in Michigan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the question. This is something that we've worked very closely with our legislative allies to make sure that Michigan is creating opportunities for people. We know that the cost of getting a certificate or a degree has kept a lot of people out of the ability to get one. We set our goal at 60%. When I took office 4 years ago, we were under 45%. We're now above 50. So we've closed the gap a third already, which is really quite a feat that we've accomplished, but now it's time to take it to the next level. And that's why expanding Reconnect. It's also why our work to tell the Michigan story about a great place for good paying jobs, a high quality of life. There are things that Michigan offers that no other state can boast. But young people are also wanting to know that their fundamental freedoms are going to be protected, that there is an equitable opportunity for every person. We hear this as we talk to young talent within Michigan who wants to stay, and others who maybe we can encourage to make Michigan their home. And so there are a lot of different aspects at play here, whether it is our incredible investment in K-12, where young families are paying real attention to what does an education look like for my child or prospective family that I'm thinking about creating, to what opportunities are there for me. And that's why sharpening our tools in economic development to tell our story and to draw investment, to level that financial barrier for people who want to get enhanced skill sets, to working with our business partners, relevant offerings to meet workforce needs, but to create opportunity for individuals to get on a path to prosperity. And that's the goal, and that's why all of these pieces impact that. I'm excited about what I think we are up to and what we can do in this moment with the kind of resources that are long overdue that we have to work with. And I think that this budget reflects the goal of range anxiety is real, and we don't want that to hold back families from participating in this transition, where they will save money and be able to do our part as we think about climate. So that's a part of what is reflected in this budget as well.
Senator McDonald-Rivet.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor. So we've had a lot of talk as of late, last couple of years, on large-scale economic development, but I also think it's really important to see targeted support for our small businesses. I heard that a bit in your presentation, but wondering if you can talk a little bit more on impact for small businesses.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. You know, I think sometimes the big announcements get a lot more coverage than the work that we've done to make Michigan competitive. We've seen historic small business growth in Michigan over the last couple of years. We know that it is the lifeblood of majority of people who are employed in Michigan are employed in small businesses, and that's why our work to ensure that whether it's the MEDC or it is state tax policy or it is working with small business to meet their workforce needs, all of these are important aspects that are reflected in this budget. Director Harkins, anything you want to add specifically on this one?
Sure. In fact, we have a whole slide where we'll be able to talk about some of those things coming up. But there are specifically some additions to what the governor just signed in PA1 this past week. There were some smart zone and business accelerator options to small businesses, but you'll also see another $135 million where the governor's deploying ARP dollars to be used specifically for small and micro businesses and for entrepreneurs to grow within the state. So there's, in addition, there are a lot of other community supports and supports around those, but those are some specific examples around small business initiatives in the budget.
Governor, thank you again for being here. At this point, I think we can transition over to Director Harkins. All right, thank you.
Thank you all so very much. I look forward to working with you on completing the budget. We're going to do a lot of good stuff together, and please count me and across the executive branch eager partners to answer questions, to help problem solve as this process is just beginning on your end. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. I will transition into some more detail for the budget. There's only a couple hundred slides, so I hope you all brought lunch. I do also wish to thank you, the legislature, for having us today, in particular for the first time in this beautiful new space. This is really a tremendous point of pride to be able to present to you. I want to also thank the governor, her staff, our cabinet, who are also here, as well as, and in particular, the budget office staff who have worked tirelessly to present this budget to you all. So as you see, the 24 budget recommendation is a total of $79 billion, of which 41% is federal resources, 24% or about $19 billion is school aid fund, while 19% or $15 billion is general fund. It's a 4.8% gross increase over the enacted 23 budget. It's only 1.84% over the current year-to-date budget. On the GF side, this recommendation is a 3% reduction over the FY23 enacted budget and 12.7% less than current year-to-date spending. As is the case with the previous budget, about 2/3 of our resources are being dedicated to health and human services, public safety, and our most vulnerable citizens. As the governor noted in her earlier comments, this budget focuses on ensuring that students have the resources they need in the classroom and that they have the environment they need to nurture their learning. 2 years ago, the governor signed a budget that closed the per pupil funding gap. This was work of bipartisan efforts and was supportive of our kids across the state. This year, the governor's recommending a 5% increase in the per pupil foundation allowance. That's $614 million in ongoing investment that will mean another $458 per pupil in the next calendar year, in the next fiscal year. This recommendation brings the highest ever amount of $9,608 per pupil. The governor also understands that the state benefits from diverse student populations. However, some of our students need additional resources to be able to thrive. For that reason, the governor is recommending significant resources for some of our additional groups of students. There's $65 million recommended to fund at-risk. There's another investment to really build on the progress that we made with special education last year. In fact, this proposal recommends an additional $80 million to achieve nearly 90% of full foundation allowance for special education. In fact, it will bring both state and federal resources to over $2.2 billion for special education at the end of her second term. That goal is not only to ensure that students can succeed, but also for new initiatives to encourage our young people to take up the teaching profession. builds on that success from last year and includes the teaching supports for the My Future Educator Fellowship, as well lunch in schools. This is an investment of $160 million of state funding to be coupled with federal resources. And it ensures with a $1 million investment that we forgive existing school meal debt. The investment in breakfast and lunch is a major step towards addressing food insecurity, but additionally, the governor builds on the meaningful investments from the current budget around school safety and mental health. Here you see a recommendation for the next 2 years for $300 million investment in mental health, as well as $318 million investment in school safety. The budget also puts significant attention on literacy. It remains critical that Michiganders are equipped with literacy skills, as the governor said, from cradle through their career. The budget expends additional funding for 10 new literacy hubs around the state to coordinate efforts and improve early literacy. Additionally, the budget increases support for literacy coaches for a total of $42 million for that program, and additional instruction time grants and continued support of things like the Michigan Reading Corps and literacy essentials training. The governor also recommends $94 million for literacy investments in Detroit. And the budget includes specific outreach to parents to make sure they understand the availability of literacy programs in their area, and that we partner with the Michigan Learning Channel to continue to provide access through local public television. The education budgets also include recommendations for universities and community colleges. In this budget, the governor recommends a 4% increase ongoing for universities and community college operations. Additionally, the recommendation includes the second year of a 3-year plan to phase in a university per student funding floor at $4,500 per student. This budget includes an additional $7 million for those purposes. Additionally, the budget includes a $200 million recommendation in a fiscal 23 supplemental for one-time funds distributed to public universities and community colleges for infrastructure, technology, equipment, and maintenance. The current year, as the governor noted earlier, saw the creation of the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. And this scholarship is currently projected to assist over 2/3 of our graduating seniors. As they embark in their post-secondary education pathway, this was a significant bipartisan success. The budget continues to ensure that as that program ramps up in its participation, that we have the resources to accommodate that. So you see in this recommendation an additional $100 million, bringing the total funding to $350 million for fiscal year 24. The budget also recognizes that student wellness does not end with graduation from high school. And so the budget includes $55 million for community college and public universities to improve student wellness on campus. And lastly, as noted earlier, literacy also doesn't end is not limited rather by age. The budget provides an increase of $30 million for adult literacy as well. Not only do we focus on our traditional students, but the budget also focuses on all aspects of the economy and our statewide workforce needs. In her State of the State, the governor called for expansion of the successful Reconnect program. In this budget, the governor recommends using $140 million of the state's unappropriated federal American Rescue Plan funds to support this programming. And as you know, federal ARP funds are one-time and need to be legislature over parks and improving. This budget works to allocate those remaining ARP dollars in a fiscal 23 supplemental, and primarily in the areas of talent and workforce development. Reconnect is an excellent example of using these one-time funds for long-time benefit. And we'll do that by expanding the age to 20 for enrollment for people who are now 21 through 24 to earn associate's degrees or Pell-eligible skill certificates. The expansion of Reconnect is paired with a recommendation for a Reconnect bachelor's degree pathway. This program will help students who had disruption on their path to a degree or credential, and will use those ARP dollars again to assist in a return to the classroom so they can complete their degree and improve on the goals outlined in the 60 by 30 plan. Another of the bipartisan successes that we've seen over the last few years is the Going Pro program. So not only does the governor recommend ongoing support for the Going Pro program, but also includes another $35 million in supplemental funds to meet the needs of our employers and our workforce. Similarly, the current year budget includes additional funds to expand employer-led collaboratives, to fill identified talent gaps and work with our workforce issues through training and education, and this budget recommends another $20 million for those same purposes. Additionally, the budget recommends meaningful investment to help retrain and retool our new industry and opportunities, identify and remove barriers to successful employment, provide additional resources to the Successful Jobs for Michigan Graduates program, and for new investments in the state's Pure Michigan Talent Connect to ensure that job seekers can find employment opportunities within the state. Earlier, we addressed the importance of continuing to fund the Achievement Scholarship as enrollment continues to grow, and this is a critical piece of this workforce puzzle. Additionally, the governor was pleased to see an expansion of statewide apprenticeships in PA1, and as we continue to build on these new opportunities, Michigan residents need access to information, so we will ensure that broadband needs are met. And a fiscal 23 supplemental recommendation includes additional funding for state digital equity planning grants to build capacity for broadband. The budget also ensures that there are specific supports available in partnership with our public universities and community colleges to make sure our student needs are met to allow them to be successful academically. As many of you know, the Strategic Outreach Attraction Reserve, or SOAR, has been successful in quickly returning Michigan to the forefront of major business investments. Projects have been approved statewide. Examples are right here in Lansing, in Big Rapids, in Metro Detroit. The governor's budget assumes additional investment into SOAR, as well as recommended ongoing revenues continued for economic development purposes. Not only does the governor recommend a total of $950 million into SOAR, including the $150 million that was signed into PA1, but the governor suggests using corporate income tax collections over $1.2 billion in future years for dedicated and specific purposes. Specifically, the first $50 million over that $1.2 billion threshold would go to housing and community development. The next 50 would be used for revitalization and placemaking efforts. And finally, the next 500 would be deposited into the SOAR annually. This ongoing revenue source will help to ensure that not only does the state have economic development dollars, but it's working to build the needs around housing and redevelop our communities as those workforce needs change and grow. As you heard this morning, the governor is also recommending $150 million to attract insulin manufacturing here in the state and to help reduce those costs for Michiganders. The governor is also proposing a $200 million credit to be spread over several years to be used in addition to new federal credits, which would encourage businesses to invest in clean manufacturing in the state. Not only do we want Michigan residents to be well educated and ready to work, but the governor is also dedicated to ensuring that our residents have strong communities in which to thrive and grow. The budget recommends $200 million in grants to support regional empowerment, allowing different areas of our state to work with the state to support, with state support rather, to determine the best investments to grow their local economies. The budget also includes new recommendations of $100 million for community downtown economic development. This initiative is intended to specifically aid our downtowns all across the state to be dense and vibrant and walkable centers for our citizenry. As noted earlier, the PA1 included $75 million for smart zones and business accelerators, and the governor's budget also includes another $135 million for small business and micro business supports. And of course, the governor also suggests additional funding for the Pure Michigan campaign. The governor's proposed 24 budget also focuses not only on strong communities, but on keeping those communities safe. In fiscal 24, there are recommendations for funding an Office of Community Violence and Intervention Services in the Department of Health and Human Services, which will pilot community violence interventions and administer gun violence prevention grants. Building on the investment in PA1, the budget recommends additional in-service training for licensed law enforcement to continue and for ongoing continuing education. The budget also includes some funding related to gun violence prevention efforts using evidence-based methods to prevent firearm injuries. And the budget recommends additional resources to continue to increase our state trooper strength with funding an additional 50 trooper recruit school and funding strategic training facility. The budget focuses on several aspects of public safety, from law enforcement to indigent defense. This recommendation increases funding to implement Standard 8 in the Indigent Defense Commission recommendations, which is related to attorney compensation. There are also many items in the budget that reflect recommendations from the Juvenile Justice Task Force. You'll find $32 million is included in the Department of Health and Human Services to provide reimbursement through the Child Care Fund for community programming identified by local units of government. There are also additional funding in the Juvenile Justice Services through our court system. The budget includes expansion of our current budget's pilot for victim support programming and MSP by allowing victim advocates to be placed around the state. There's $5 million appropriation for job courts, which help to divert offenders from the criminal justice system. And the budget also considers the safety of our corrections officers and our incarcerated population. Medication-assisted treatment programs were recommended by the Opioid Task Force, and this investment is designed to help ensure that substance use within our prisoner population is identified and treated and addressed, rather than letting it lead to reincarceration. Additionally, MDOC is recommended to create a special investigative unit to focus on issues of harassment, assault, and retaliation within the prison system. And lastly, the governor's budget recommends that MDOC corrections officers receive body cameras. The governor remains strongly committed to supporting our veterans and the National Guard. As part of the governor's ongoing commitment to Selfridge Air Force Base, this budget recommends an additional $10 million for maintenance and facility upgrades. The governor also recommends $5 million to support the Michigan Defense Center within the MEDC to bolster our defense sector industry within Michigan. Similarly, the budget recommends $2 million in LEO to assist in research and development around mobility technology and its defense applications. And lastly, this budget includes a $1 million appropriation to recommend support for outreach campaigns to our veterans to prevent suicide and raise veteran suicide awareness. The budget proposal includes a 5% increase ongoing and a 5% increase one time for our cities, villages, townships, and counties. While revenue sharing is discretionary, the budget also initiates a new revenue sharing allocation, one that is specifically intended for public safety. These payments are equivalent to 2% ongoing increase and a 5% one-time increase, and are meant to assist locals with recruitment, retention, equipment, and capital needs. In addition to the constitutional revenue sharing, which is estimated at $1 billion in fiscal 24. These statutory revenue sharing increases for CVTs is $327 million, and counties are recommended with an additional $285 million. The executive budget includes vital support for programs that impact both individual and public health while focusing on broader needs of our communities. This budget recommendation includes a transition for a new Medicaid rate for nursing facility reimbursement. HHS and the nursing home industry are working currently on developing a new reimbursement methodology that we expect will be in place by fiscal 24. So these dollars are recommended to help smooth that transition over the next 2 years. Additionally, as the governor referenced earlier, the budget reflects an increase in hourly pay rates for direct care workers, representing an additional increase of approximately $1.50 an hour, as well as an hourly recommended increase for non-direct care staff as well. Additionally, the budget provides for nearly 60% increase in funding for local public health services. This $30 million increase is an investment that will allow our local public health departments to fulfill their statutory requirements related to drinking water, infectious disease control, food protection, and other critically important access to care. The budget recommends increasing access to maternity supports and expands access to Medicaid pregnancy and young children services through the Healthy Moms, Healthy Babies program. Additionally, the budget recommends expanded Medicaid coverage for family planning services through the Plan First program under Medicaid. One of the single largest areas of investment recommended in this budget is related to clean and safe drinking water. Initiatives both in the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and are buttressed here by investments within HHS. Here, nearly $125 million of ongoing and one-time resources will work to deliver water filtration, faucet, and plumbing replacement to communities with lead contamination and ensure that clean drinking water is available to our residents. Additionally, the budget recommends $130 million for Medicaid reimbursement and benefit enhancements. These changes will increase reimbursement rates for Medicaid services to ensure that enrollee access improves, expand eligibility for Children's Special Health Care Services, or CSHCS, to include young adults up to age 26, and to add a recuperative care benefit for Medicaid beneficiaries who are experiencing homelessness and now need short-term transitional services. The Racial Disparities Task Force released a report last year, and this budget includes many items to implement those recommendations, including a $15 million recommendation for neighborhood health grants to work with community-based health clinic partners to deliver better outcomes and improve access. $6 million is recommended for mobile health clinics to meet people where they are. Additional funds are recommended for sickle cell research and support, and $10 million is recommended for IT and data improvement to better understand and address disparities in healthcare. Caring for each other and caring for our children are a key aspect of the state's health services programming. Here you see the governor work with community-based health clinic partners to deliver better outcomes and improve access. $6 million is recommended for mobile health clinics to meet people where they are. Additional fund support, and $10 million is recommended for IT and data improvement to better understand and address disparities in healthcare. Caring for each other and caring for our children are a key aspect of the state's health services programming. Here you see the governor's calling for a tax credit for child care educators, which will be a refundable credit up to $3,000 for individuals working in licensed child care settings, as well as preschool and after-school programming. This budget also includes increases in child care worker reimbursement rates and strengthens the Child Care Licensing Bureau in Lara, which is charged with protecting the health, safety, and welfare of children in our child care settings. This budget also provides new tools and supports for foster families, as well as enhancements to direct reimbursement for adoptive families, guardians, and foster parents. $19 million gross will increase financial support to foster families, guardians, and adoptive parents by 8%. And additionally, new investment of $15 million will provide foster families with short-term respite care, which will, with a statewide specialized caregiver support system. Lastly, the budget also recommends funding in the 23 supplemental for the Double Up Food Bucks program over the next several years. The budget includes $40 million of ARP spending to work with local governments to provide water utility affordability, and uses ARP funding as well and other federal resources to enhance home energy updates and weatherization efforts. The governor's budget continues to also focus on efforts ensuring residents have a clean and healthy environment to enjoy. As noted earlier, Eagle is recommended to have a $226 million investment specifically around lead line replacements. These dollars will be deployed around the state and will continue the work done to help ensure clean and safe drinking water. Additionally, the budget includes a $100 million deposit into an environmental justice contaminated site cleanup fund. These dollars will be used to remediate and redevelop contaminated sites and expand air pollution controls in areas that have been historically disadvantaged and impacted. Orphan well remediation is recommended at $5 million, and $25 million is provided to restore Michigan waterways by removing non-essential dams and to grow our recreational water economy. The executive recommendation increases staff resources and modernizes the MyEnviro permitting system with a $15 million investment to streamline permitting and generally improve the permitting processes within Eagle. Additional IT investments are recommended related to groundwater management to ensure that the state has accurate data for the preservation of a resource from which 40% of Michigan's communities draw their water. A $15 million investment is recommended for a mineral recycling hub. This hub's intended to conduct research into recycling processes that are essential to the modern, recycle minerals that are essential to our modern electric and industrial economies. The state's significant agricultural sector also plays a key role in our economy, as well as our natural resources. This budget includes a $10 million investment to promote the climate-smart farming practices used by the USDA. This investment will ensure farmers on a voluntary basis have the support necessary to keep water and soil resources safe. The budget also includes, both in an accompanying 23 supplemental and the 24 recommendation, funds for research and to respond to issues of emerging contaminants in both food and the agricultural system. There are also resources recommended for cold storage to prevent invasive carp from entering into the Great Lakes. And $12 million is recommended to develop an invasive species and habitat strike team to lead and accelerate efforts to prevent intrusive new species. Investments in our state park will help to allow more individuals to experience the state firefighting. $6 million investment in $64 million in 23 as part of a multi-state and federal partnership to prevent invasive carp from entering into the Great Lakes. And $12 million is recommended to develop an invasive species and habitat strike team to lead and accelerate efforts to prevent intrusive new species. Investments in our state park will help to allow more individuals to experience the beauty of our great state. Additional resources for state park operations and improvements at Belle Isle will improve visitor experiences. Additionally, the governor is recommending a new program with $4 million for every fourth grader in the state to visit nearby state parks. Technology around mobility continues to develop quickly, and Michigan is well positioned to lead the country. The budget requests $160 million for grants around the state to ensure capital projects needed for intermodal transportation like rail and buses and marine transit are met. And as the governor mentioned earlier, this budget also recommends a temporarily exempt sales and use tax on purchases of electric vehicles. Supporting that transition to more electric vehicles in 23 supplemental also includes money for EV charging stations, a conversion of the state and local fleets, as well as school aid improvements for electric buses. And not only does this budget focus on improving and preserving our natural resources, but it focuses on improving our infrastructure as well. As you're aware, the federal government has enacted the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IJA, along with other actions like the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. The federal government includes considerable resources for states, but unlike some of the previous supports from the feds, many of these resources require matching grants from the state. So in this budget recommendation, there's a supplemental for $350 million to be set aside for future matching needs, which will allow the state to act in a nimble fashion to ensure that our state taxpayers see the federal resources deployed in our state. The governor remains committed to funding road and bridge improvements with an additional $200 million of general fund for bridge building across the state, as well as $5 million to support broadband. School infrastructure, as the governor referenced earlier, are also major investments, with both $500 million deposited into the existing infrastructure fund and another $300 million deposited for things like air quality, HVAC, energy enhancements, and drinking water upgrades. The improvements to roads, bridges, and schools are coupled with meaningful investments in housing. As PA1 invested $150 million into housing, you also see, and we've discussed earlier today, an ongoing support in Housing Community Development Fund directing $50 million annually. The 23 supplemental also uses remaining ARP funds to address migrant housing needs, and we also wish to work with attainable homeowner programs to emphasize the use of skilled trades in renovating existing land bank properties. Investing in IT is an investment in infrastructure. The state's been planful in utilizing the Information Technology Investment Fund to deploy resources across state government. This recommendation includes an additional $41 million on an ongoing basis, over the ongoing base, rather, to fund an additional 10 IT projects around the state to maximize to maximize customer experiences and improve legacy systems. Lastly, we should discuss fiscal responsibility. This budget includes significant one-time resources, and the governor recommends deploying those resources with their temporary available. Ongoing resources are used to support ongoing program changes, but one-time revenues are used to support one-time spending. The governor's proud to see that the bipartisan efforts of these last several budgets have been noticed. Just last year, for example, Fitch boosted the state credit rating, the first such increase in 10 years. Many of the items that Fitch pointed to in their upgrade are being reinforced in this budget. This recommendation includes a $200 million deposit into the BSF recommended in the current fiscal year. This deposit will bring the BSF to nearly $2 billion total by the end of fiscal 24. That'll mean that our BSF deposit is over 13% of the general fund revenues established at the January Revenue Estimating Conference. Additionally, the budget recommends a new school aid BSF and deposits $900 million into this fund to help protect our students from any future instability. That's $1.1 billion deposited into state savings accounts. Combined, those deposits could bring our rainy day funds to nearly 9% of our combined general fund and school aid fund revenues. Additionally, the budget includes $2.3 billion for MIPSR's contributions, another $1.6 billion for state contributions above the statutory cap for unfunded liabilities. And this budget includes payments for payroll growth assumptions and lowers those as well. So, this budget proposal focuses on lowering costs. It strategically works to grow the economy and provide supports for our students and our workforce. The budget focuses on families, public safety, improving our communities. This budget addresses long-term needs around infrastructure and environment, and it does these things while making financially sound investments. Madam's Chair, that's my presentation of the governor's 24 fiscal year recommendation, and I'd be happy to take some questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. We appreciate it. All right, we do have a few questions. Here on the Senate side, we'll start off with Senator Bonestead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, Chris, thank you for your presentation today. I appreciate it. If the governor's budget rec were implemented, how much of our $9 billion surplus would still be left?
That's a fine question, Senator. As you know, when we make changes to our tax code and we make sure that we reinvest in our people and put money back in their pockets, that's a direct impact on our resources. And so what you see in this budget recommendation leaves about $250 million on the balance sheet between both general fund and school aid fund at the end of fiscal year 24.
Thank you.
Representative Menser. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Director Harkins. It was really very interesting. There has been a lot of conversation and some excitement over the repeal of the retirement tax. Can you clarify who is and who is not included in that repeal and how it will lower costs for Michiganders?
Sure. So the governor has proposed a repeal of the retirement tax the last several years. And this retirement tax would change things for both public retirees as well as folks who draw private, a significant impact to those individuals. As the governor said, when fully phased in, could mean as much as $1,000 more for those households each year. 2011 and allow for those same exemptions, but it would also ensure that no one's paying more by keeping some of the exemptions that were put in place for those people who are working and are still low-income earners. So it will certainly make a significant impact to those individuals. And as the governor said, when fully phased in, could mean as much as $1,000 more for those households each year.
Senator Hertel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director, for being here today. And to the previous question, thank you for clarifying the impacts of the pension tax. That's something that I've been working very diligently on here early in this term, and I appreciate the information that you're providing. You know, one of the things that I've been very excited about, and there's a lot to be excited about in this budget, is the commitment the governor and the administration has made to investing in Selfridge Air National Guard Base and making sure that we're doing everything we can to attract a permanent fighter mission there at the base. And the Senate just today passed a resolution to that end to show our support. And I see here that the $10 million budget or line item in this budget, or recommendation, it's my understanding that's part of a broader goal to continue making more investments at the base. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. You're right, Senator. The governor put some money in the budget last year, put some additional resources in the budget this year around defense, and intends to be doing that over time. I think the governor was very clear in her State of the State that she continues to want to see investments from both the state and the federal government in Selfridge. We know how valuable having that resource is in the state, and you see that commitment by these sort of investments. This $10 million can be used to make sure that we have upgrades around that facility, that we can become and are more attractive as the feds consider how they wish to deploy resources in the future. And I think making sure that the governor's been very clear about that public statement, and I think that helps to ensure that we're successful as we go forward.
Representative Whitmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. This is a lot of money. And one of the things that, we're concerned with is obviously, we're still recovering from a previous recession. We're recovering from COVID, learning loss, shutdowns, lots of those things. And I see that there's lots of programs in here that, just on the face, look like it's good, but it's a lot of one-time money. So what I'm curious about is what we're actually doing to be, you have this page in here for fiscally responsible, but this looks like it's the 22 budget, and I'm looking at 23. So what are we doing to offset our liabilities that we already have, like with MIPSers and just debt in general that we have?
Sure, and as I noted earlier, Representative, we've continued to pay down our MIPSers obligations. As I alluded to, we're also strengthening the payroll growth assumptions that help make sure that we're well suited for those costs as they go forward. These deposits into the BSF are meaningful. They help make sure that we have supports if necessary, but we're also doing some things like paying for deferred maintenance. Those are areas where we would very much like to see our 21-year-olds eligible for these programs, but we know that with the resources we have, we're going to build that in a way where we address things now and we take care of those goals. It's been a real focus on ensuring that these one-time dollars are not built into ongoing programming. The temporary expansion to Reconnect is a great example of that. We're very mindful of the fact that we would very much like to see our 21-year-olds eligible for these programs, but we know that with the resources we have, we're going to build that in a way where we address things now and we take care of those goals with temporary resources and do it in a way where we don't stretch the budget in the future.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, thank you for your very thorough presentation. I was really excited to hear about our investments in our local governments and their infrastructure. I'm interested particularly when you mentioned the Regional Empowerment Program. Can you talk a little bit more about how this program will be structured and how the funds could be utilized by regions?
Sure. So this is kind of a proposal that was initially included in last year's budget recommendation and is included again, specifically because we know that our individual regions know themselves best sometimes, and when we work with our regions to figure out how we can deploy state resources, it can be more impactful. So the way that this is intended to be structured is to have grants out through the MEDC to regions where they have multi-jurisdictional programming or benefits. So these are things like investments in housing or workforce supports or things that the region itself comes to the state and says, this is what we would like to do with these sort of resources. So it's really should be seen as an effort at partnership with our local units. And I think we can be very successful in deploying those resources when we work with the folks who are closest to the ground.
Representative Weiss.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director, for your presentation. One of the things I'm very excited about with this budget, and that I've been very excited about with our previous budgets, is that we keep passing, the governor keeps proposing, and the legislature keeps passing historic investments in school aid. And I think that that's really critical, and I think it's showing that our state is prioritizing education in these budgets, and I'm glad to see that continuing here in this executive recommendation. One question I had, and again, I'm excited to see the continued increases both in the foundation allowance, the per pupil allotment, as well as additional weighted supports to prioritize equity for our at-risk students or special needs students, English language learners, et cetera. One of the things that you mentioned is that this proposal gets us to about 90% of funding for special education. What is that gap that we still have yet? Like, what is that amount? And do you have any thoughts on how we can get there to making sure that we're fully funding special education needs in the state of Michigan?
So, Representative, I'm going to do something I shouldn't do, which is off-the-cuff math. But this increase of $80 million is roughly a 12% increase. So, for context, I think we'd be in that same kind of ballpark to achieve the 100%. And I'm going to turn and look and see if it's about right. So, I feel good about that answer.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I believe our final question from the Senate side will go to Senator McMorrow.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Harkins, for being here and for all of the work from the department for putting this together over the past few months. Is there consideration, and for a little bit of context, we had a very sobering first presentation in our economic and community development showing that, like many states around the country, we have an aging population. And even before the pandemic, I represent a number of school districts, one being very small, that was on the verge of financially going under just because of declining population size. Is there consideration in this budget as we look to upgrade and improve school districts in potentially incentivizing some districts who may want to consolidate and share resources, hopefully for, a short term until we can start to move kind of those population trends with the rest of the country in the other direction?
Sure, and I appreciate that question. Certainly one of the governor's primary concerns is growing our population over the next several decades. But before we're able to do that, we are focused on some of those consolidation efforts. In fact, in the current year budget, there are some resources available for schools who are interested in doing some of those consolidation efforts. I think as we also look at some of those infrastructure dollars, those are excellent places to be working with our school districts to reevaluate infrastructure need. And to work as we go forward to make sure that those new facilities, which will be excellent places for students to work, to learn, for teachers to work, that they will also be deployed in a way that makes sense for population change.
Director, thank you. Thank you for the time. This has been informative. As a reminder, this is the start of our budget process, so I know we look forward to partnering with the administration. Our subcommittee chairs in both the House and the Senate have already begun working and partnering with the administration, so we look forward to that. As a reminder to anyone joining us, this entire presentation will be online at michigan.gov/budget. And with that, I'll look for a recommendation for us to adjourn. Is there anyone who would like to move? All right. Moved by Senator Shink, supported by Senator McDonald-Rivet. Do we need to call roll? All right. Without objection, the Senate Committee on Appropriations stands adjourned.
Seeing no further business, Representative O'Neill moves to adjourn. Without objection, the House Appropriations Committee stands adjourned.